Welcome back. As the world population continues to grow, cattlemen must produce more beef with fewer resources. Cattleman to Cattleman reporter Matt Fleck has the latest on a USDA-funded research and extension project that will help develop the tools ranchers need to improve feed efficiency in their own operations.
The sustainability of the beef industry continues to be a major topic of discussion, and as the cost of inputs continues to rise, efficient use of feed becomes even more important. Feed efficiency, or the amount of body weight gain from a pound of feed, is one key to improved performance and profitability.
I think feed efficiency is a huge part of our operation. As far as the bottom line, with feed costs increasing and availability maybe being a little more limited, I think it's something that we're all looking at.
It's usually close to 2/3 to 3/4 of our total cost. So it represents such a large portion of the cost. If we can make animals more efficient, then we have potential to, save some of that money that we spend on feed.
Feed efficiency is not a new measure, but it is one that is receiving more attention as costs increase. Unfortunately, to this point, the beef industry has made minimal progress in accurately measuring efficiency.
We're good at measuring outputs, but inputs like intake are hard to quantify, so historically it has not been measured a lot, or if it's been measured, it's been basically measured on a pin basis, which we can equate back to a specific sire potentially, but very difficult to measure on an individual animal basis.
If we can identify some of these cattle that are more efficient and propagate them, that on down the road will have a lot of value to us.
One group of researchers is working to expand what we know about feed efficiency. They're part of a USDA-funded project called National Program for Genetic Improvement of Feed Efficiency in Beef Cattle. The main goal of the project is to identify genetic markers associated with feed intake, and from that information, develop selection tools for feed efficiency in beef production.
It's a multifaceted project. It involves 20 individuals from 10 different institutions across the country. The project has goals of trying to understand genetically what creates genetic variation in feed efficiency, and how can we develop tools based upon that understanding that will allow us to estimate the genetic merit of animals for feed efficiency without having to directly take intake data on those animals.
The project leverages existing feed intake and composition records from historic research projects and those collected by U.S. beef breeds, and collects new records to build an even more comprehensive resource. One of the major challenges of feed efficiency research is collecting and measuring individual intake. But at the University of Illinois, they have a system in place which allows cattle to be maintained in a pen environment, yet have individual intakes recorded.
We have a system called the GrowSafe system that allows us to do that. All of our cattle have an individual electronic ID tag in their ear, and then these bunks have an antenna around the top, and it reads that electronic ID, and there's a set of scales under each bunk, and that allows us to know what each individual animal eats at each meal, and then we put that together. At the end of the day, you have the average dry matter intake, and yet we've still maintained that pen environment, so you have the same social interaction and behavior that you would have in a pen feeding system.
Early research results have found estimates of heritability to be moderate for different measures of feed efficiency. Researchers are capable of generating molecular breeding values for feed intake in Angus, Hereford, and Simmental. Many breed associations are taking advantage of this work.
What we found is using genomic tools, we're able to explain upwards of 30 to 40% of the phenotypic differences for feed intake or residual feed intake across those different populations. So the heritabilities that we see just using genomics align with what we would expect using traditional phenotypic information, which suggests that we can actually develop tools that could help and aid in selection for these types of traits.
So where I think we'll see this technology going is it's just going to become a blending, and in 10 years' time we'll look back and we'll have pedigree information, we'll have phenotype information, we'll have marker information of various kinds, all getting blended together in a production system that comes up with one estimate of the EPD of an animal.
The researchers are talking to breeders and breed organizations about providing access to project data and discoveries. This would allow the inclusion of genomic-based information to flow into traditional genetic evaluation systems and selection indexes. Ultimately, it will allow for the development of breeding programs for more efficient animals. In addition, the group is working with several international collaborators to pool data on common breeds. The goal is to increase the accuracy of generated MBVs for both U.S. and international breeders.
This trait is very important internationally, and there are a number of groups that are trying to gather large amounts of phenotype data and genotype data on similar breeds throughout the world. Genetically, those animals may look a little bit different to the cattle we have here in the U.S., but they're not that different, and so by pooling data, we'll be able to potentially develop more models for more breed associations to develop genomic breeding values.
Welcome back. Let's return to reporter Matt Fleck with more on the USDA's feed efficiency study.
Since each producer is directly involved in making genetic decisions, it's important for them to be aware of the tools and methods available to improve feed efficiency. A unique and valuable component of the current project is the integrated nature of the research program.
About 2/3 of the funds from the project grant are research focused. About 1/3 of the funds in the project are dedicated to extension and outreach activities to help producers learn about DNA technology, genomic selection, how to use selection index and EPDs for feed efficiency to make that improvement we hope they will in feed efficiency of beef cattle.
At the end of the day, we really want this technology to be deployed in the industry. And to that end, we integrated an existing project called the Weight Trait Project, whereby 24 seed stock producers in the Northern Plains region, representing 7 different beef breed associations, are actually engaged in the evaluation of the research component. So it's really a way for key technology adopters to test drive this, to gain some comfort level with it, and then to actually utilize it for selection purposes.
Improving feed efficiency could provide benefits both to feedlot and cow-calf producers. So researchers are also evaluating intake differences between concentrate-based and forage-based diets to see how they relate to each other. The goal is to identify cattle that are efficient on both types of diets.
One of the other aspects that this project is going to look at is the relationship of feed intake and feed efficiency on a high grain diet compared to a forage diet. Because a lot of the data that's been collected and contributed to this project is feedlot focused, and in the feedlot, feed yard, we're feeding a high grain, high concentrate diet to those cattle. Yet the cow herd's maintained on pasture and fed forage. And so we need to understand what is that relationship. The cattle that are efficient on grain, are they also the same cattle that are efficient on a more forage-based diet?
This study may also result in important environmental benefits. Preliminary findings by the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center show feed efficiency has a surprising impact on greenhouse gas emissions.
They found that the cattle that were more efficient actually had a higher methane emission.
But now you have to come back and ask the question, but wait a minute, if they're more feed efficient, does that mean that they eat less food over a feeding period until we get them to slaughter weight? And the answer is yes. So when you look at it from the perspective of per animal taken through to finishing or per pound of beef produced in the production system, then the animals that have higher feed efficiency produce less total methane in production. But on a per pound of dry matter intake basis, they actually produce more.
For producers, the results of this USDA study have the potential to provide tools and information that will allow them to select more feed-efficient animals and lower feed costs, ultimately improving profitability.
Clearly the objective here is to make cattle more efficient, and if they're more efficient, we produce more beef with less feed intake.
At the end of the day, that helps the beef industry relative to sustainability. It aids certainly in world food security by producing more with less, and it helps the producers in the beef industry that are making the bulls, that are buying the bulls to produce terminal calves, it helps them remain more profitable in a competitive marketplace.
The feed costs and production costs have been increasing on such a rapid rate that any time we can implement some of this stuff into our program and be more efficient in our own operations, it's probably going to be the difference of staying in business or not.
I'm Matt Fleck, reporting for NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman.
To read up on the latest findings yourself, go to the project's website at www.beefefficiency.org. And you can always check out our website at cattlemantocattleman.org for more information and video replays of your favorite stories.